Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to wherever you are in the world. I am Dr. Amina Ali, and I welcome you to the 2023 Mental Health Town Hall as represented by the Republic of Ghana. And we are going to be celebrating the understanding and the betterment of mental health as it is presented to us from Ghana. We have 4 panelists that will be outstanding in their presentation, in their giving, and their knowledge for what it is that mental health represents, what it means, and what solutions are going to be brought to the table for the Republic of Ghana. We're going to be introducing each of the panelists respectively as they are asked a question. Then at the very end, we're going to have a final question, and then we will close out with other information and ways to get in touch. So panelists, while we are waiting and while we are ready, can you please put your name, your email, and your LinkedIn or your website in the chat box? Thank you. In the chat box as we speak. This is so that if any of the students or any of the advisors want to get in touch with you about work or contracts, they will have your direct connection to us. And again, this information is shared through the live stream, which is coming from Fordham University, NYU, and I see you over here, Columbia University. And we have students from Fordham Law. We have a couple of students that are dealing with international policy, foreign policy, and we have, I think this is poli-sci. So they're going to be coming in asking about ways to help. We have 2 people from biology majors. I think they're majoring in medicine. So they're also, and then the rest are just psychology majors, those that are majoring in mental health, behavioral health, and even I was told special education to deal with the children in the educational model. So thank you all for coming. Thank you for being here. And thank you for allowing us to have this time with you. We have embassy ambassadors, consul generals, high commissioners, diplomat dignitaries, honored guests, supporters, and local attendees. I thank you so very much for coming today, being a very wealthy part of this conversation, and offering these diplomats and panelists the opportunity to have their voice elevated and heard as it responds to mental health solutions. Our opening remarks are going to be from the Federation of International Gender and Human Rights. For those that are interested in wanting to be a part of FIGHR, as we call it, we have a few offers and opportunities for you. Our opportunities come by way of mentorships and fellowships, as well as internships that are welcome for the Federation of International Gender and Human Rights. Some of them are sexual and gender-based violence, intimate partner violence, and domestic violence, all in one. We have peer mental health advocacy, which is training you how to be a peer mental health and refer the resources that you have to your psychological and psychiatric resources in your community, and how you can be an advocate for your community and your village right where you are. We also have a course in dignity. We have sexual and gender-based violence. We have the cross-cultural diversity and inclusion. We have implicit bias, and many more that you can come and welcome yourself to be educated and informed, as well as becoming an advocate. Each of our certificate and fellowship programs come with instructional abilities as well as advocate capabilities built into the repertoire of our program. So our curriculums come established, accredited, and offered to you in that accessibility model. So we thank you so very much for coming and being a part of what FIGHR offers the community. We have a special message this morning from Queen Mother. She is our elder. She is our wisdom, and she is the one that we sit at the feet of in this due diligence of mission. And she has a special message for each and every one of you today.
Hello, FIGHR family, and welcome to our special event today to celebrate the wonderful world of women and the work that we're doing to co-create a better world. I'd like to give a special thank you to the United Nations for sponsoring this event and all the events that are occurring this month. And I'd like to give a special heartfelt thank you to our fearless leader, Dr. Amina Ali, who actually dreamed and brought into fruition the Federation of International Gender and Human Rights, which we all refer to as FIGHR. And yes, we are on fire. I'm here today just to remind you what great work you're doing at a time when the great work is so needed and called for. The idea of gender and human rights and equity is not just the frosting on the cake. Where we are right now and what we have to deal with and what we are needed to deal with more than ever before runs the gamut from climate change to even trying to make sure that we find peace in the world, that the moment that we are now doesn't cultivate into World War III. And so I appreciate, and the world appreciates the work that you are doing to look inward and to look outward, to look at yourselves and look at each other, and to understand that we actually can break through those barriers, those things that separate us, and we could create unity, and we could work together with one heart, one mind, and one set of hands. So I want you to enjoy this event. I give thanks for every one of you that are participating in it. You are fabulous. All of you know that I am president of your fan club, and I am just so inspired and encouraged by the work that you're doing, by the passion that you bring, and by the hope that you bring and that you keep alive. So go right ahead and do what you're called to do, knowing that all is well. And when all is said and done, we are bringing a new world. We're carrying it. We're pregnant with possibilities, and it is being birthed as we speak. Thank you. Hello, Fire.
For those of you, thank you, Queen Mother, and thank you for those words. She always inspires us, and she always gives us a great part. For those that are wanting and willing, I have to apologize because I didn't do things right and in order, as I always try to promote. I'm going to ask if Ambassador Ramjohn, if you can open your mic and open us up in prayer, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Ali. Heavenly Father, we thank you this morning for the opportunity to come together as one body of fire in Christ, to participate and to share our experience, our knowledge on mental health to the benefit of all those who are listening, to every heart and every ear that it may fall upon. We pray that they would walk away with more knowledge and more experience to deal with mental health, the disorders, the illnesses, the many ailments that we have and suffer. Father, bless us all with that wisdom as we continue to share and do according to thy word and spread thy word upon this earth. We give you thanks, Father, in Jesus' precious name. And we say amen, amen, ashe.
Thank you so very much, Ambassador. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And I apologize for being out of order in that moment. Those that are not interested or those that are not sure, for those ambassadors that are on the live stream and those students coming on new from Columbia, NYU, and Fordham, the history of FIGHR is very, very simple. The Federation of International Gender and Human Rights is a social impact organization that is designed and defined to be solutionists for problems dealing with gender and sexual and gender-based violence, intimate partner and domestic violence, those that are healing from being a child bride, those that are human and sexually trafficked, or use survival sex as their means of making money. And we do this intentionally. We deal with those that are on the ground, dealing with the problem in its entirety, and those that can be closest to the problem to bring the solutions closest to the people that need it the most, period. We do this by imploring those that are already working in the field. We don't create anything new, and we definitely don't make anything harder than what it needs to be. We just use those NGOs, those nonprofit organizations, and those charitable organizations that are already doing the work to elevate their voice and allow their voice to be heard in the solution for the problems that exist. And today is no different. We have gathered 4 experts in the field, in their respective fields, excuse me, for what it is that they do and how they do it. And we're bringing it full circle in the realm of mental health. Now that affects everyone. And the Federation of International Gender and Human Rights, or FIGHR as we call it, is definitely on fire to make sure that we have solutions for mental health in each of the capacities. So these panelists are definitely willing and needing to allow you to hear their voice. They are women in their own right. They are women in their own expert fields, and they are definitely bringing the solutions in real time for those that are suffering in the calamity of mental health. So we thank each and every one of them for coming today and being here a part of this town hall. So the purpose of this panel, the mission is very, very simple. We bring solutions, but the purpose of this panel is for those that are educating and being educated in the field to be able to hear these expert voices to tell you what it is that's necessary. In the past, we have had people that would go to foreign countries such as Africa, and it would bother me so much to hear people go into West Africa specifically, and they were just doing things that they would choose to do, whether their religious house of worship sent them or they had some mission that they were on. They would go to countries and give them what they wanted them to have. They would never sit down with leaders, with experts, and with those that are delegated to do the work and ask, what do you need? What is it that you need to make your programs? What is it that you need to make your plans and exact a solution for the things that you're looking for? So now I decided that the Federation of International Gender and Human Rights would do that. We would hear from those experts. We would hear in the voice of those doing the work, and we would listen to what they say and offer the situation a hand up in solution. So today is no different. And what it is that you will hear today will be orchestrated from that voice. But first and foremost, we will hear from our diplomatic speaker of the day, which is Ambassador Dr. Andrew Ramjohn, who is Mission Ambassador to Trinidad, Tobago, and the CARICOM, who will give our opening remarks for the day and address mental health in a general sense to welcome in the panelists. Ambassador Ramjohn, you can unmute your mic. The floor is yours.
Thank you very kindly, Dr. Amina Ali. And I want to welcome all of the participants this morning. I say good evening, good morning, wherever you are.
Dr. Ramjohn, can you elevate the volume on your speaker, please?
Oh boy. Oh boy. Okay, I can do that.
Okay.
There we go. How's that?
Okay, it's a little bit more clear. It was very, very low. The tone was very, very low.
All right. All right. So I just want to go on to say that according to my research and study, mental health is such a worldwide problem. But if we do not understand certain things about the problem, and I'm really hoping I'm going to hear as much as possible today from our participants, but there are three factors, the key factors. There are many, but the key factors of root causes of mental health issues. A, the biological factors. The biological factors which refer to genetic predisposition, neurological, neurochemical imbalances, etc. Things like disruption in the brain chemicals like serotonin or dopamine, things like that. Two, the psychological factors like trauma, childhood abuse, neglect, or other significant life events. Two, the chronic stress, prolonged exposure to stressful situations or environments. Three, the maladaptive thought patterns, meaning the negative self-beliefs, the congenitive distortions or irrational thinking. And four, low self-esteem, which is poor self-worth, negative self-perception, or lack of confidence. And thirdly, my third key factor of the root cause is the social factors. One, social isolation. lack of meaningful connections, loneliness, or social withdrawal. 2, unhealthy relationships, toxic or abusive relationships, which contribute to distress. 3, discrimination and stigma, experiencing prejudice or being marginalized due to gender, race, or other factors. And 4, the socio-economic challenges, which is financial instability, for example, poverty, or limited access to resources. And with that, I say thank you very much, Your Excellency, Dr. Ali, and I hand it over to you and the panel because I'd love to listen to what their information would be. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Ramjohn. We have we have questions coming in already from Columbia and NYU respectively. And they're asking questions about how to get over to Ghana to be able to work with you. So of course we're going to add them in, but now you'll get to hear the panelists individually. And I will go with our first panelist is Madam Ambassador Gladys Binney. She is founder and executive director of Auntie's Impact Movement Ghana, and she has my goddaughter, Ghana Peace Ambassador, and she is from Accra, Ghana. And I welcome her because I have loved her work over the years. I've seen what she's done. She's very, very resourceful, very impactful, and someone that I truly respect as a professional. And of course, I'm biased because my goddaughter sits on her lap daily, and I don't get to hold her as much as I want to, but she is someone that I truly, truly respect as a woman, as a professional. And today, Madam Binney, your question is, in Ghana, what will it look like to have full access to mental health services, either virtually or in person for women in rural areas? Very, very important, the rural areas. Please outline what a thematic plan would look like. Madam Binney.
Thank you so much, Dr. Amina Ali, and good afternoon to you all. As I was rightfully introduced, I'm Gladys Binney, Peace Ambassador and the founder of Auntie's Impact Movement GH, in short, AIM Ghana Foundation. I'm privileged to be here, and thank you so much for this opportunity. In as much as I am not a healthcare personnel or a mental health care personnel, I did a short research on women with mental disorder and how we as individuals can help our fellow women to overcome such disorders. We first look at how having access to mental health will help our women in the rural areas. First and foremost, people usually misused the words. That is when in Ghana specifically, when someone has maybe a depression or something, they classify as the person is mad. So most people don't even check their mental health status, because the moment you walk into a hospital or a psychiatric, they classify as the person is mad. And this is one of the biggest challenge in Ghana. Most people don't want to visit the psychiatric because they will be classified as they are mad. So having full access of mental health care in region, district, and small communities is going to help the country at large, especially our women. Let's take, for instance, a problem I encountered last week. A young lady was filling a form for university. She wanted to go to nursing training, and I told her to choose Pantine Mental Health Hospital. And she didn't want to do the health service there because she feels like she's going to deal with only mad people. And this is heartbreaking because people don't even want to venture into such profession. So I think at the moment, what we need as a country is massive education on mental health. We should let everybody understand that depression is also part of mental health. Our daily activities can give us this mental health issue. It is very important that each and everybody know their mental health status, because if we don't, within a short time, we will be doing things that we are not supposed to do. I will use this as an example. I was having a dear good friend who was passing through a lot of problems in her marriage. It got to a time that I realized she was having a mental issue, but it's difficult to tell someone to see a doctor or a psychiatric doctor because of their attitude. They will automatically say you are telling them they are mad. This is a very big issue for me, because I realize my friend is going out of track, but how do I convince her to see a psychiatric hospital or a psychiatric doctor, sorry. So having access and giving massive education on mental health issue is going to save the country and everybody, because you don't even know the people you are dealing with. Some people are driving, but they have mental health issue. They can easily have accidents on the road. They can do certain things that you don't understand. We have doctors who are in the hospital who have mental health issues. They forget things easily. They can even change medicine from one patient to the other, but they are not ready to seek mental health assistance. So having quality education, massive education on mental health, and giving easy access for people to interact with medical doctors, psychiatric doctors, to teach them and impact on them on mental health education, it's really going to help. Because, for instance, we have young people. I was reading something this afternoon and looking at the statistic. At the age of 5 years up to 25 years, they can all have serious mental health issue, considering where they live, the kind of life they live, the people they live with, the environment as a whole. How do you assess easy healthcare if these people are not given easy access? So if we give the education, if we make it easily accessible, if we make the healthcare, mental health care accessible to individuals and the young people, because people feel shy to go to the hospital to check their mental health status. But if we have a separate mental health hospitals for people like that, I think it will be easy. We should create a very nice avenue for them to be able to access the doctors easily, so that mental health will be reduced. In Ghana, the government is doing so much to reduce mental health. In 2019, they launched mental health protection for people with mental health issue, and it's really doing well. Some of us are also doing our best to go to different areas to teach young people about mental health and depression. And as a country, I believe that building an accessible mental health can help the youth and the country at large to be peaceful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Binney. Thank you so very much. I really appreciate you and your share. I also appreciate that last part you did for the youth. That really touches me, because that's where we're going with our services, making sure that the youth and those that are coming up have access to it, and make sure that that is a cultural competency that is allowed, and a cultural appropriation within our community. So thank you so very much for saying that. Okay, next is, we have a great speaker. She is somebody, of course, that I know very, very well. And this is Madam Ambassador Augusta Boateng, excuse me. She's the founder and executive lead at She Media and mission ambassador for the Republic of Ghana. And she too hails from Accra. She is somebody that has done many, many extensive journalistic papers and reviews on the subjects of women, especially the disparities in women. She is truly, truly a professional and someone I respect in her own right. And Madam Ambassador, your question for today is, what systems are in place for the North and South of Ghana, respectively, that needs help to expand? And what would it be if we could design a plan to be ready? Madam Augusta, you can unmute your mic. The floor is yours. Uh-oh. I think she lost connection. Okay. But we'll go for it. She may have lost connection because I can't unmute her from here. Oh, there she is. There she is. Okay.
I am here. I am here. Sorry,
Okay,
sorry. I lost connection.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. So your question is, what systems are in place for the North and South of Ghana, respectively, that needs help to expand? And what would it be if we could design a plan to be ready, Madam Ambassador?
Thank you so much. And it's an honor to be here once again. And a very good afternoon to all of you, to my fellow ambassadors, and to Dr. Amina Ali, and to everybody that has joined the call. Thank you so much for being here for this very important conversation, because we may think that mental health is far-fetched, but it's actually very close to us. And we may, in a way, in every phase in our lives, come into contact with some form of mental health. And so it's very important that we are all here to have this conversation. So mental health is a very critical topic to me personally, because I have a family member that has a mental problem. And so I've had firsthand experience of the systems in Ghana and how it works. And so anytime I have to talk on mental health, it kind of triggers some emotion. But of course, we need to talk about it to be able to raise more awareness and create some kind of welcoming environment around the topic and what we can do to respond to the situation. So when it comes to systems in place for the North and South of Ghana, I think, or from what I have read, there are no specific systems that are in place which are specific to the North or the South of Ghana, because studies I did showed that what is practiced in the North is basically what is done in the South, although there are some specific differences with regards to the cultural differences and the way of life of the people of the North and the South of Ghana. But then again, the systems are all the same. And when I talk about systems, there are not really some well-established systems in Ghana when it comes to mental health. Because in Ghana right now, I know of 3 major mental health hospitals in Ghana. One in the Western region, which is also in the South. 2 in the capital of Ghana, which is Accra. And because I have a family member that is going through mental health, I can emphatically say that assessing mental health in Ghana is expensive and not everybody can afford it. As of 3 years ago, for a family member or for someone to access a psychiatric hospital, you would have to pay a little over 100, and that is for a month treatment. After a month, that patient has to go home. And so when you bring in your patient, you feel if you pay whatever you're supposed to pay, you leave money for their food and leave extra money for transportation, in the sense that after the month, if you don't come back for your patient or your relative, they use that money to send that patient away, back to the house. So imagine a patient who is not fully recovered, and you are sending that patient back to the home, doesn't really sit down well with me. And the last I checked, now you are paying a little over $200 to have someone that is treated. And how many Ghanaians living in this economy now can afford that? And so you walk on the street and you see a lot of mentally unfit people on the road, a lot of them on the road, and there's no proper system that is in place for them. There's no shelter for them. There is no place that they can go, nothing. And everybody, every minister, policymakers are all on the streets. Every day they see them, but nothing is being done because there are no proper structures. There are no proper systems anywhere. There is this thing that I learned. You know, when mental problems or mental illness start, we don't immediately link it to medical issues. In Ghana here, we think, oh, it is religious. Someone is doing you, is someone that has brought a curse upon you. And so we put these people in health facilities for proper checks. They're taken to prayer camps, put in chains. You will go to a prayer camp and there are human beings put in chains because they are mentally unfit and people are so scared of them. And these people are treated less of human beings. Some are described as witches and wizards, and they are put in camps, in witches' camps, to fend for themselves. And so there are no specific systems in place here that respond to mental health. Unless you have your money to take your patient or your family member to a psychiatric hospital, or even for basic medical mothers, you see fathers, you see people's children on the streets, and nobody seems to care because that is not my family member. People cannot be bothered because the policymakers, the ministers, people that are put in positions to take care of these are not doing their work. It's so pathetic when you go to these places. And the other thing that is so pathetic and very sad is that most of these psychiatric hospitals are even under-resourced and understaffed. And so NGOs, CSOs are the ones that go in there and do donations for them, for them to be able to take care of the patient in their custody. And so there's the issue of under-resource, and then there's the issue of government officials not being really putting in structures for issues when it comes to mental health. Because immediately someone is sick, immediately we see a sign. And you know, some of these mental issues also come from the fact from women who go through childbirth. Because I know a couple of women who went to childbirth and had postpartum depression. Immediately you are tagged as a mental person. Immediately you are attacked. Immediately there's that stigma. Immediately there's that disassociation from people, and even family members suffer the consequences. Even family members of people that are suffering, you're walking on the street and someone will point a finger at you. Oh, she's the family member of that woman that is mad. And so you would want to also be careful or not associate yourself with that. And so I can see that. So I was reading something and I realized that only 2% of Ghana's 2.3 million people living in mental health cannot receive psychiatric treatment. And it all boils down to what I mentioned, to poverty, to religious beliefs, that really, let's take them to prayer camp because that is where they can receive the healing. There's a point where you can take the person to a prayer camp, but we need to take the very necessary steps to ensure the person has that. And there's a high cost of psychiatric help that I mentioned. And so if we are looking at ways that we can design a plan, then I think this is the point where district health officials or even the Ministry of Health come into play here when we are looking at how we can best have what do you call it, a safe space for people who are mentally unfit. A safe space in the sense that if I have a mental problem or if I am going through depression and I have a self group of like-minded people who are going through similar things, I'm able to relate with them. I'm able to feel safe around them when we're having conversation and feeling belonged. And so if there are these self groups around, and if social welfare in Ghana here is also putting measures to ensure that when people are showing signs of mental unhealthiness, the first point of contact is for them to receive help, mentally help, before the prayer comes. And if we can also put the National Health Insurance scheme, we can have a mental health, what do you call it, clause in there, where anybody that feels depressed, anybody that shows any signs of mental health can actually go to the hospital with their National Health Insurance scheme and know that I can afford it because I have a card. There's an insurance for it. Because it's expensive treating mental health in Ghana, very expensive. So if the National Health Insurance, the Ministry of Health, and the Ghana Health Service are coming together to say that let us put the treatment management of health under the National Health Insurance scheme, then I know that families can be willing to take their parents or their families to hospitals, psychiatric, and that we see people on the streets begging for food, eating on refuse dumps, which also goes to affect their overall health, aside them having a problem mentally. And so these are the three major things I'm going to point out for us to have mental health treatment under the National Health Insurance scheme. The social welfare, the Ministry of Health, and the Ghana Health Service issues to be able to have that conversation, to feel safe around each other, because then I can relate to you. No stigma, there's no tag that will be able to speak measures that we can help treat people or to curb this issue of mental health in Ghana as a whole. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, I was muted and I couldn't even come off. Thank you so much, Madam Ambassador. I really appreciate that and that insight. We have someone that asked a question actually about the insurance, and they asked specifically about, is it free or will it be something that you have to pay for? I know here in the United States we have free insurance, but is the program designed to be free, or is it going to be at cost, and what is the cost specifically, because they would like to offer scholarships and grants to help certain mothers, women and children with that insurance. So that is a great question that you can answer in the chat. For those that are waiting and those that have already spoken, you can check the chat. We have a ton of questions coming in, at least 15 here that I see, that are just asking basic questions from what it is that you have already stated, what you have mentioned, and they have feedback from it, and they're just sending it in. This is from the live stream, of course, and we don't have any ambassadors sending in any questions as of yet, but as soon as you see a question that you're of interest, please scroll down past the question, hit the reply button, and give them a reply so that they will see that you are interacting. So our next speaker that comes is Madam Joyce Oheniwa Kwapo. She is a journalist at Today Ghana TV, News TV, and she is a sexual and gender-based violence advocate and leader that I know well in that field, and she is from the central region of Ghana, if I'm correct. And she is coming today to speak to you through her expertise, in that she's also, of course, as a journalist, but she in her community sets the standards high for sexual and gender-based violence advocacy. Madam Kwapong, your question is, how can Ghana merge culture, language, and tradition to full access to mental health in undeveloped areas. Madam Kwapo.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Amina Ali. And I also want to say a very big thank you to Dr. Antonio and all our participants online, as well as my fellow panelists. I deem it a great privilege to be here to speak on such an important topic, because the issue of mental health has been something that a lot of people have overlooked, especially because they feel they have not been clinically diagnosed with any mental health condition. And so we often tend to not pay much attention to this particular topic in most of our day-to-day activities. And so I'm glad to be here to speak on this, and most especially because I am also handling a mental health person, and it hasn't been easy, but it has taken so much commitment and effort to see through that he attains stability, mental stability and all that. I've happened to face embarrassment at some of our mental health facilities, because sometimes the person outbursts, emotions and all that, and it's kind of hectic, but it's something that I have taken upon myself. I have spoken to a few people on the streets who have mental health conditions. And I mean, there's one particular one that I see him and then I'm like, oh, you're not looking too good. You're looking all dirty. Go home, wash down, and then change your clothes. And he does that perfectly well. And also with the initial person I spoke about, family and everyone have had enough of his non-compliance to medication and treatment. But then I happen to be the only one that has taken the thought to take him for checkup every month at one of the psychiatric hospitals. And it's been a tough journey, but it's something that I have stayed committed to. And I know that we can all play our roles one way or the other, even through this advocacy we are doing online with this virtual tour. We all have a little part we can play to make sure that the mental stability of people are sane. And so I'll go directly to the topic. And already Dr. Antonio spoke briefly about mental health. I would want to say that with the little research I did, sorry for the interruption. Mental health is a state of mental well-being that enables people to cope with the stresses of life, realize their abilities, learn well and work well, and contribute to their community. And so one way or the other, each and every one of us go through our own episodes of Sorry for the interruption. So one way or the other, each and every one of us go through our own episodes of mental stresses in life. And that makes us more vulnerable to mental health problems. And so I would say that none of us here is immune to mental health problems. The WHO, that's the World Health Organization, states that mental health is more than the absence of mental disorder or disability. And so most of us tend to think that when we talk about mental health, it's about you being insane or having a mental disorder or disability, but it is not so. And so the need for action on mental health intervention generally, not only in undeveloped areas, is undeniable, is crucial and very urgent. So Ghana, for instance, is made up of people from diverse cultures who speak different languages, and then they also have different traditions that they succumb to. And all these factors come to play when they are seeking or they seek for full access in terms of mental health. Now, let me move to culture. With culture, it's defined as the societal norm, values, and beliefs that a particular group of people ascribe to. So when you come to the Ghanaian tradition or the Ghanaian community, we have different types of cultures. And these different types of cultures can impact whether or not a person seeks help, what type of help that they seek, and what kind of support that they have around them. And so it's very important that we understand the role that culture plays in mental health so that we can support our loved ones and encourage treatment when it is needed the most. We must also bear in mind that every culture and person is different, and we all face our own unique way to recovery. The fact that a particular person had a mental condition and it took the person barely 6 months does not mean that you know of someone else or a relative that faces the same situation. You expect that the person should take 6 months to recover. It differs from one person to the other. And also, in relation to our cultural setting in Ghana, most of our communities have the notion that mental health illness has a spiritual dimension. And so most of them resort to traditional healers and then traditional healing centers instead of going, or home healers, instead of going to seek biomedical care or health care. Most of them believe firmly that with mental health illness, it is caused by the manipulation of witches, ancestral spirits, demonic forces, sorcerers, and all that. And so the cultural setting of our Ghanaian environment makes a lot of people have these misconceptions about mental health. Also, looking at the cultural background of people in undeveloped areas, you can determine that it affects how the individuals communicate about their symptoms, and it influences the understanding of the condition that they are facing, as well as the coping strategies that they adapt, and then the type of interventions they seek. Because of the cultural background, some of them believe that they are not supposed to go to the hospital to seek medical attention. They would rather prefer going to prayer camps, as Ambassador Augusta mentioned, to seek for care instead of seeking for proper medical care. Also, inhabitants in undeveloped areas in Ghana mostly have insufficient access to medical health care. And so, as I mentioned earlier, they rely on these cultural healing methods for full access to medical care or medical health. We have staff from Ghana here who are usually posted to various health facilities. So someone can be posted from a community that speaks only Akan, and then it's sent into a Gan community. Most of the inhabitants speak Gan, and so the differences in the language due to the culture makes it very difficult for the families of relatives who are suffering mental health conditions to communicate with healthcare practitioners. And so when it happens that way, sometimes it brings about wrong diagnosis and a whole lot of complications, which deters most of the relatives from visiting healthcare facilities. And so culture plays a very massive role in accessing full mental health care. Also, for instance, let me tailor it to midwifery, or let's say women who are going to give birth. Some cultural beliefs in some communities makes pregnant women seek to other alternative ways of childbirth delivery. Some of them use controversial herbal medicine to induce contraction. Care practitioners have advised them against these things. They believe more in their cultural practices and what their culture teaches them than what the medical care practitioners tell them. And when it happens that way, it affects the health of both the mother and the child. Also, we can even look at some sociocultural practices like the female genital mutilation, where the female would have to go to have her sexual organ cut. It has a lot of negative complications or implications on the child or on the person going to be cut. However, because of the cultural practices of the people, they have no choice than to send their daughter to these people who do the cutting to have the child cut for FGM. And also we can look at, with respect to culture, we can look at the dietary supplements or taboos in various cultures. Some cultures have particular foods that they eat, and so they are restricted to that, whether or not it's affecting their health or is making them anemic or nutritionally deficient. They go strictly by their foods that they take because of their culture. And so even when they are advised to take or to change their diet, they are a bit hesitant to do so. So there are lots of harmful effects on some prevailing sociocultural practices, and these things affect the mental health of people. We can look at 4 ways that culture affects mental health. One is cultural stigma. And so with the cultural stigma, every culture in the Ghanaian society has a different way of looking at mental health. For many, there's a growing stigma around mental health and mental health challenges. It's considered as a weakness and something to hide. So a lot of people don't feel comfortable coming out to admit that they are facing certain mental health challenges. And so it makes it a bit harder for those struggling with mental health issues to talk openly and ask for help. Also, understanding symptoms. Culture also influences how people describe and feel about their symptoms. It affects how they choose to recognize and talk about their symptoms. Sometimes they are facing physical symptoms, sometimes it's emotional symptoms, but they are not able to understand it because of these cultural differences. Also, with culture, we can talk about the community support. Cultural factors determine how much support someone can even get from their family and community when it comes to mental health. Because of this same existing stigma that we've been talking about, a lot of minority groups are sometimes left to find their own mental health treatment without any support. We can look at the resources as well. When looking for mental health treatment, sometimes people want to talk to people who have understanding of these specific experiences and concerns, yet they do not get. And so it becomes very difficult and time consuming to find the exact resources and the treatment options that they have to take into account with regards to the specific cultures and the needs of those cultures. So now let's look at the language. When we are talking about language, we are looking at communication. And it's important that when dealing with issues of mental health, we look at how effective our communication is. It's very important to speak to such people with so much respect, because already some of them feel isolated, some of them feel dejected. And so in terms of language, we should look at our choice of language and also speak to them with respect. When we are talking about language too, we are looking at linguistics. And then in Ghana here, a lot of people have diverse linguistic backgrounds. You look at refugees, some who are coming from other countries like Mali and other countries to seek for support or to seek for asylum in Ghana. You can also look at other people who are traveling from north to the south to seek for greener pastures. Most of them have already experienced so much torture and then trauma with respect to their daily lives. And so they move for comfort. But then sometimes they don't get that kind of support that they need. And so they are distressed, they are left in a very vulnerable state of mental health. And so we can help them in terms of speaking to them, communicating with them to understand some of the issues that affect their mental health. And so in this case, language is very important. Also, with regards to mental health, language is as important as medicine and as therapy. Medicine is important in terms of mental health. Therapy is also important, but these things, it is through communication, it is through language that you'll be able to communicate some of these things to the people who are suffering from these conditions. And in terms of psychiatric care, doctors depend on interactions with patients to be able to arrive at the appropriate diagnosis and therapy that they are supposed to give to the patient. And so language is very important when it comes to mental health. As I mentioned earlier, with the work with staffing in mental health facilities, most of these people are not natives of the community. And so it becomes very difficult to communicate with them. Most of them only understand the Queen's language, that's the English language. And so it becomes very difficult to interact with the members in the communities because they might be speaking the local language, that's Chi or Ga or Ewe or Frafra. Some of these health practitioners are not used to these particular languages. And so because of the language barrier, it doesn't help with effective communication and it hampers effective treatment. And so it's advisable that the government looks at it and make sure that health practitioners are posted to communities where they already have background in those languages to make treatment and healthcare very easy and accessible. Also, language plays a key role in stigmatizing mental health or mental illness, because certain languages sensationalizes mental illness, and then it reinforces some kind of stigma. When you speak with someone living with a mental health condition, the language must be very respectful and accepting. Rather, you have to focus on the person, not the mental health condition of the person. So in dealing with people with mental health in terms of language, don't just look at the person, look at the condition of look at the mental health condition and try to use the means of language or communication to address that and not describe the person as how he is, as mad or mentally challenged or mentally unstable. Also, I would want to highlight the fact that positive language affects mental health, because our language impacts our thoughts, and then our thoughts impact our emotions. And so it's very important that when dealing with such people, we speak positively to them. It's very much important. Okay, so I'll say that we can all do better in understanding the power of the language we use and how language really matters when it comes to accessing full mental health care. Let me give a very practical example. For instance, you know someone who is suffering from a particular mental condition. Instead of saying the person is living with instead of saying the person is a mental patient, or the person is a lunatic, or the person is a psycho, using those derogatory terms are very bad. It's very bad. And so we should rather say the person is living with a schizophrenia issue or something. We should try and then make our language a bit more professional and positive so that they wouldn't feel stigmatized. Also, we can say that a person is being treated of a particular condition instead of saying the person is a victim of depression or the person is a victim of schizophrenia. We should rather say the person is being treated for that particular condition, because these are ways that it will help people to seek care or not feel stigmatized. Now, the issue of tradition. Tradition has got to do with the way people think or behave or do things in a particular way for a very long time. And usually it's the transmission of customs and beliefs from generation to generation. So every generation has what they pass on to the younger generation. And so in terms of tradition, usually in Ghana, the traditional approach to mental health in several undeveloped communities includes the use of herbs, the use of spiritual therapy, counseling, and psychotherapy. And also in undeveloped communities in Ghana, most of our traditional healing is the most common alternative to biomedicine or to healthcare in Ghana. And research indicates that the traditional healer-patient ratio in rural communities is 1:200. So to every one traditional healer, there are 200 patients that he's attending to. That is what the statistics say. And so you can imagine most of them have forfeited going to seek proper medical care and have resorted to these traditional healers until the situation gets out of hand. Most of them do not even seek for proper care. Also, evidence shows that 80% of the rural population rely upon traditional medicine for primary health needs. And this can be explained by the accessibility and affordability of traditional medicine. It seems that most of the people resort to traditional medicine because it is affordable and it's easy accessible. You go to our health facilities and then the cost of these medications that the patients need, most of them cannot afford. And so they go into their communities and then they seek for help from these traditional healers. And most of the times, these traditional healers do not take huge sums of money upfront. Some of them is after the person has been healed that you give the person a little token to say thank you. Some even take files, some take just really things that do not cost so much compared to seeking for help in a health facility. And most of these things are taken after the patient has fully recovered. And so it's very important that we look at that. Traditions also remain deeply entrenched in most parts of our country, despite the educational, religious, and tribal differences. And so key things I would want us to note before I come to a conclusion is that to gain full access to mental health, it is key to establish that affordable, effective, and feasible strategy exist. And they don't just, if they don't already exist, they are put in place to promote, protect, and restore mental health of persons in undeveloped areas in Ghana. And how can this be done? This can be done by integrating our traditional healing and biomedical health care into our mental health care facilities. Because a lot of people are also denied access to care when these medical practitioners realize that they have resorted to other traditional means of healing before coming to them. And so we have to see how we can possibly integrate these two to make sure that there wouldn't be any gap between these two means of seeking for health care. Also, we need to identify and select credible healers for collaborative initiatives and practice. So with our traditional healers and our actual healthcare practitioners, that's the medical healthcare practitioners, they should be willing to organize efforts and cooperate and collaborate with each other so not to turn away patients who are seeking for alternative care after the traditional approach has failed. Also, healthcare workers that have been posted from urban areas to these undeveloped areas should make sure that they welcome opportunities for communication and education, especially on the indigenous languages of the communities within which they work. And so if these healthcare practitioners are transferred from urban areas to these rural communities, they should make the effort to understand the languages within which the indigents communicate so that healthcare would be accessible for them. And then it would help also in the diagnosis of their health conditions. Also, I would say that they should air a lot of radio or TV commercials regarding mental health in different languages. We see some adverts from mental health centers and organizations, but then some of them are just in the Queen's language, that's the English language. It makes it very difficult for people who do not have an understanding of the English language to understand some of these things, and for carers or family members to also understand some of these things. And so if efforts can be made to bridge the language barrier, whereby communication will be transcribed into different languages for people in undeveloped communities to understand and be able to assist with mental health issues, that would be very fantastic. Finally, I would say that there's the need for basic supplies in our health facilities, especially in these undeveloped areas. Most of these undeveloped areas are understaffed. Some of them do not have the basic supplies like hand gloves, like Dettol. People with mental health conditions sometimes act in ways that make the place unhygienic, but then they don't have the necessary basic supplies to help to keep the facility neat. And so that's one reason why a lot of healthcare practitioners refuse, as our first speaker said, they refuse to go to these mental health facilities to practice their medicine or to practice their various medical courses. Because you are done with school, you are posted to a medical health facility, and then a mental health facility, and then the resources and the place is just not conducive for you to operate or function. Most of the people refuse to go to such areas because they are understaffed and they lack these basic supplies that will help them to function effectively. And so I would want to conclude by saying that we are able to promote mental health when we show respect for people from different cultures, different background or life experiences. And when we practice inclusion and appreciate diversity, we are able to promote full access to mental health. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Kwapong. I really appreciate that. And I appreciate your insight. That was a lot. The students have been sending questions to the chat. So if you will, while we assess our time management, the intern said that we will lose the live stream in about 10 minutes. So we don't have enough time for our final question for today, but it is something that I wish that we would be able to ponder. We have, excuse me, we have one more question that we have to get in. Madam Ambassador Ama Omoako, she's a diplomatic ambassador for the Republic of Ghana. And she is a sexual and gender-based violence and mental health advocate. And she too is from Accra. Madam Ambassador, if you would, in the event of a natural disaster, a war, or tragic event, such as an earthquake, what is in place now in, they're supposed to say Ghana, sorry, to meet the needs of those that are currently under medical care for mental health? What needs to be implemented for better crisis management? Madam Marco, if you can you unmute your mic? You have about, unfortunately, we have about 5 minutes for your presentation before we get to the questions and answers, before the live stream cuts off. So Madam Marco, can you unmute your mic and begin your presentation, please? Did we lose her? Okay, I think we lost her in the connection. Okay, if she comes in, if we have time, we'll add her to the presentation. But I apologize again for the disconnect for her. Now we are coming into the live stream questions from Fordham and NYU. Because we have so many in the chat, I'm just going to read some of them aloud so that there will be some points that maybe they can be answered at some point. And if you look at the chat itself, you can see that there are quite a few. One is from, what are you doing for women and girls facing postpartum depression in the rural areas? That question wasn't really touched on too much. Fordham says, if you were offered a mental health program for the rural areas, would there be a governmental subsidy for the broadband bandwidth for the program? So in other words, if they come and set up the program, would the government step in and offer the IT piece and the internet piece? NYU says, is there a competent pharmaceutical stock for those in mental health crisis? So that means, do you have enough drugs and alcohol, drugs and alcohol prevention, but suitable pharmaceuticals to adverse those for those that are being, that are taking it for the diagnosis? Some people self-medicate. Some people allow themselves to be self-medicated through that. And they want to make sure that there is a huge need for pharmaceuticals and the help, because sometimes you can have all the therapy in the world, but if you don't have competent pharmaceuticals, it may not mesh into the proper mental health. Another question from NYU, is there a system in place for the youth dealing with suicidal ideations? And what do you provide at current? These are questions that, of course, we would always put to task when we are developing programs for needing countries. So these are questions that we would need answered. NYU says, are you prepared for natural or unnatural disaster and in the rural areas? And is there help with PTSD services for those that are needing them? I know the services are limited, but do you have programs that you just need funding for, or just need spatial accountants for PTSD measures? It's huge here in the United States with the veterans that need PTSD matters in mental health. So some of the parameters that we're working with as far as the NIH or National Institutes of Health, as well as the CDC, as well as Africa CDC is working with those that are needing PTSD measures. Last question, and it's just a random one. Is Ghana registered with the WHO? We have programs to open there if the country is registered for the need of help. That was a huge one that I didn't even realize that you could actually register your country with the WHO. I thought you just had to go through the UN for the constituent help, but WHO is offering now. So if you don't have that capability, just log into WHO, World Health Organization, and register your country so that there can be substantial help The students are able to go over some of the things you don't have to pay for because the students are required for grades. Some of the students are also saying that there are programs that they are going to bring to the country that can be sustainable and repeatable organizations and practices. So those are just a few from NYU, Fordham, and Columbia. Thank you so very much for that. We're going to intercess with, do we have enough time for the final question now that Her Excellency hasn't come on? Okay. He said we have about 3 minutes. So I'm going to pose the final question. If there's anyone that wants to answer it very quickly. After the crisis has passed, what are some steps that, again, this is supposed to say Ghana, guys, is taking to implement aftercare programs in the community to allow ongoing and sustainable care in mental health? Does anybody want to answer that question, please? You can unmute your mic. No? Okay.
Okay.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
Can you hear me?
Ambassador Binding.
All right. So Ghana has been doing its best to improve health care facilities in Ghana. Ghana launched the National Mental Health Policy that was started 2019 with the funding from the World Health Organization, the Commonwealth, United Kingdom, and diplomatic offices. Ghana has also launched the Quality Right Initiative program to improve healthcare and the right of people living with mental health. The sad news is that the country can launch a lot and great initiative to protect people with mental disorder or people with mental health issues. But after the launch, nothing happens again. We have a lot of initiative that has been launched, that has been broadcast by the media, but nothing has been done. So right now, we have more than 3 or 4 initiatives that has been initiated by the government. It was publicly launched, but as at now, the funding is in, but the people who have to have access to it are not getting access to the funding or the facilities. So these are the challenges for me, because the country can launch a big project, a big campaign, and you see funding coming in, but the people who are in need will not have access to it. So I hope that this very great initiative by you, Dr. Amina Ali, people who you believe they can take up this course will be the leading people, so that the beneficiaries, the people we need them to benefit, will actually benefit from it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. No, you're right. And that's the goal of this mission, is to be able to take up their torch and pass it on to the youth as we develop it. The idea behind this very town hall is to get expert voices to speak to that. So yes, thank you so very much for that. Thank you for answering the question. And in the limited time that we have, I thank you for being the voice to answer that question. So you are registered, so there will be a great need for those students that are listening from NYU, Columbia, and Fordham to please reach out. If you scroll up at the very top of the chat, each of the panelists have added their name, added their contact points, and they are able to reach out to you via LinkedIn so that you would be able to reach them and get these points mastered. If there is a offer to travel to Ghana, I'm pretty sure each of them would be able to direct you to get your visa on up to locations that you can sponsor and help, because the help is definitely going to be welcome and needed. I also think that there will be a great understanding as to what it is that is necessary and needed for what the country is needing, what they are desiring to have as programs, and then the help that is necessary for you to offer. So thank you so very much for that. Dr. Ramjan, you have your hand up.
Yes, Excellency. I just wanted to say, in view of what I have heard, regarding the trauma and that comes from the FGM, from PTSD, from the stigma, the trauma and post-traumatic stress have a profound impact on mental health. But as a society, we have a responsibility to recognize, support, and empower survivors. We can do that by fostering understanding, providing accessible mental health services, and advocating for systematic changes. We can contribute to the healing and recovery of individuals that are affected by trauma and post-traumatic stress. Thank you kindly.
You're most welcome. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Before we close, I'd like to thank each of the panelists specifically. Madam Kwapong, thank you so very much. Madam Ambassador Baini. We have Madam Ambassador Augusta Boateng, who is Mission Ambassador to Ghana. And thank you so very much. Madam Ambassador Marco was disconnected, I'm gathering. I thought she was here earlier, but we want to thank her for at least registering to be a host today. We want to thank, of course, Mission Ambassador Dr. Andrew Ramjohn, who is Mission Ambassador to Trinidad and Tobago and the CARICOM, for his diplomatic speech earlier. These communities of need that are happening in Ghana are definitely in need. So we thank NYU, Columbia, and Fordham for your students here today. Just a note to the panelists, we had well over 100 students listening to you today from each of the colleges. They were listening intently. They have well over 72 questions that I could not post today. I was adding them in as I could. They were very, very good questions. Most of them will probably reach out to you directly to ask these questions. So please, please, please look out for them. The students are very diligent, and I know the prior facets of this program has gotten great reviews, and they've been reached out to both on LinkedIn and their private connections. So I thank you so very much. I'm going to close this out so we don't lose connection. Father, we thank you so very much for this opportunity. We thank you for the balance of power, the prestige, and the insight of each of the experts that have come before us. With all hearts, minds, and understandings to this mission to be clear, we thank you again for being the challenge giver and the way maker to add solutions to this epidemic. We ask that you open doors, open minds, and open solutions to those that are in need, and allow the great, formidable way of your grace and mercy to enter into each and every heart and mind that is here today, to be a solution and be a resource for the things that are necessary in our lands. Thank you so much. Amen. We are going to close out, letting you know that if you have any further information, please reach out to FIGHR.org. For more information on our programs that we spoke about at the beginning of the hour. Also, you can reach out to us about FIGHRinfo@gmail.com. Coming soon, HarborHeritageUniversity.com, first and only university for gender and human rights. It'll be accredited university. Well, it is an accredited university, offering an associate's, bachelor, master's, and a PhD in gender and human rights studies. We had a graduation the other day for our first chaplain that came through, and we have another graduation on June 3rd for our next group of chaplains that will be coming through as international interfaith professional chaplains, certified and ordained in such with their doctorate in professional studies. So I'm very, very proud of them, and thank you all for coming. Thank you all for being a part of this, and thank you again for having a great time with us. God bless you all. I thank you for your shares and what it is that we are doing together to be a solution for mental health. God bless.